Welcome to the March 20th Policy Review Committee meeting. I have one housekeeping item to note. Going forward, to memorialize revisions to administrative guidelines, they will be listed as informational items on the Policy Review Committee agenda. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. Has anybody signed up for public comment tonight?
Yes, there are 2 individuals registered for public comment. During public comment, persons wishing to make comment were required to register prior to the designated start time of tonight's 6 p.m. meeting. When public commenters' names are called, I ask that they please approach the podium and begin by stating their first name, last name, and municipality. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. The 3-minute time clock will be projected on the screens located throughout the room. The board asks that all public commentary be directed to the board as a whole. Public comments may be interrupted or terminated if the commentary exceeds 3 minutes or if the commentary is obscene and/or threatening in nature. All persons attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves with decorum and civility. In addition to refraining from abusive, profane remarks, please be respectful to all persons in public comments, including those comments and opinions that may differ from your own. Distracting and disruptive behavior or other actions which interfere with the orderly conduct of the public meeting will not be tolerated. I'll now call the first speaker, Daniel Gillen.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all again. I have 2 brief items, and I got to escape my name.
Can you say your name
Yes,
and
sorry.
please?
Daniel Gillen, Thornbury Township. Good evening, everybody. 2 brief agenda items to comment on. The first is some of the revisions to the policy that I took a look at in the agenda. And the first deals with the changing of pronouns from his, her to they or their. And while this is not grammatically incorrect based on my research, depending on who you ask, I don't know if my old school English teacher would agree with these changes, but nevertheless, it strikes me as unnecessary and somewhat as a source of potential future confusion, especially in paragraphs where there's some paragraphs, clauses that deal with both board members or members of the board plural, and then a specific board member, depending on the topic of the policy. So my specific questions are, why are these changes being made or proposed? What's the need for these revisions? Wouldn't it be better to just leave those revisions just as they are, that text just as they are? Is the reason political correctness, or is it something else? And if something else, what exactly is it? So that's number 1. Number 2 deals with section 000, code 004 of the local board policies. And this is on page 27 of 72 of the agenda PDF. And it addresses the new training of school directors. And most of it's self-explanatory, but one thing that caught my eye is trauma-informed practices. Specifically, I think the quote is, the 1-hour instruction on best practices related to trauma-informed approaches. I did a little digging on this. I think it might be the same training that perhaps staff has received regarding trauma-informed care. And I know based on my research on the website that trauma-informed care encourages the trainee to address behavior issues and perhaps other issues by asking, what happened to you? So I guess I'd like to know if I'm on the right track. Are both these one and the same, or essentially the same? And then my follow-up question is, asking what happened to you in response to a behavioral issue. This, I don't know, it sounds like a lot like something maybe a psychologist or a mental health professional might ask, as opposed to an untrained educator. So perhaps the board could tonight or in a future meeting or a post just explain a little bit more about trauma-informed care and how it does not necessarily cross into the realm of unlicensed psychology or practice. And also perhaps explain why the training is beneficial and necessary for school board directors. Thank you.
The next commenter is Judy DeFonso.
Hi, Judy DeFonso. I still live in East Goshen. Talking again a little bit about Policy 200, looking at it again. I noticed there's a couple of times where immunization is mentioned, and we have a policy 203 on immunization, and I was thinking it might be good to have, like, see policy 203 for additional information, right in policy 200 when we're referring to immunization, because it, let's just say, clarifies a lot of things in the policy on immunization, and, you know, people should know where to look for it. The other thing I was looking at, I was just looking at like the revisions. I was curious about one of the revisions, and it's like, they list when the revisions were done, right in the policy. December of 2014, April of 2018, August of 2017, and September of 2019. And I noticed, first of all, that the dates weren't in order, and it kind of bothered me that, you know, I thought they'd be in sequential order, either ascending or descending, but they were kind of in a random order. And then I wanted to look at the change that was done in 2017, because that was the one where we stopped allowing 4-year-olds who were born early in September to test into kindergarten. And again, I started in August because it said August 2nd was when the revision was, and I actually found the revision, it was on October 9th that the first read was done. And I'm trying to figure out what these dates are supposed to represent, because there was also, I found the revision for April of 2018, and the date is actually the date that the school board meeting happened that's listed in the policy. So that kind of like, you know, cross-references and makes a lot of sense. But I couldn't find a change for 2019, and I didn't bother looking in the archives for the changes from 2014. But I'm just trying to figure out, I guess, as a question, like, what should those dates represent? Is that the first read, so we go forward? Does that represent the date that it gets adopted by the board at the board meeting, and we go backward to see what the revisions were? I'm just curious what the dates represent, especially since they weren't in order and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Our next item on the agenda, I take these glasses off, I can't sit close with them. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 21st committee meeting. So I'll go ahead and take that vote. Laura?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Okay, so that, yes from me, so that's a 4-0 vote. Another item of note is this informational item, Home Language Survey Administrative Guideline will be renumbered from 200 AG7 to 200 AG6. Now, Dr. Reynolds will now review policy 251.
Thank you. For 251, this is a quick note as we move from first read. We noticed in reviewing for second read under authority that we had mistakenly eliminated a sentence that's highlighted students experiencing educational instability shall have access to the same educational programs, activities, and services provided to their other district students. That sentence was mistakenly deleted, so we wanted to make sure that it was added back into the policy and put for review. Other than that, 251, the other changes that were discussed at our previous meeting are intact.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee or the board? Okay, so Mr. Wagman will now tell us about changes to policy 830.
So just
We have,
procedural question, was there supposed to be a vote?
we have a vote on that one.
I apologize.
No, no,
Okay.
no.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take the vote on the home language survey. I'm sorry, we'll go ahead and take the vote on policy 251. I'll go Laura,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
and I am a yes also, it's 4-0. And now Mr. Wagner, thank you. Dr. Peters.
Thank you. Back last fall, the state of Pennsylvania passed Act 151 of 2022. Essentially, it was legislation that provided state agencies, including school districts, any agency that deals with state information and personal information. It provided regulations regarding the handling, management, transfer of electronic data. Prior to that, Pennsylvania really didn't provide any guidance in that regard. It was up to local entities. So we did have a policy formally that dealt specifically with data breaches. The Act does cover data breaches plus some other measures around prevention of data breaches and of course the management and transport of those documents. So it defines personal information in the following way. This is, by the way, this is apart from FERPA. This is state, FERPA is federal. But social security numbers, driver's licenses, financial account information, medical information, health insurance information, and combinations of email and passwords that might breach an individual's account security. So essentially, Technology Pool Council provided us with a template that mirrors the legislation as it applies to school district. Our general counsel also reviewed it, and it goes on to define pretty closely with the way we defined it in the old policy 830 or the current policy 830 of access control, backup, and data storage, retention, which we have a retention policy, and so forth. What is listed here is essentially has been our practice. I do want to note, because it's the next item on the agenda, the state calls information that we do not retain transitory electronic data. We used to call it temporary data in our retention schedule. So the change in the AG is simply changing temporary to transitory, so the language matches the state. There are some administrative guidelines that we'll follow that will essentially memorialize the practices that we currently employ, and we will be, in accordance with this policy, making those guidelines, making those available to faculty, staff, and students annually through their respective publications. Are there any questions specifically on the policy, the definitions, anything at all?
I just have a question on the, going forward to the 800 AG1. Since we don't have a copy of that change for that administrative guideline, so just to confirm, the only change in that is changing the word transitory to temporary?
Temporary to transitory,
Okay.
yes. In our retention, in our data retention policy, certain items are considered ephemeral, so we call them temporary, it'll be transitory.
Okay, and that's the only change to that.
Yes, that's the only change.
Any other questions? So we'll go ahead and vote on the change to policy 830. Laura?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so it's 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we don't have to vote on the informational item, which is the change to the 800 AG1. So then we will move on back to Dr. Reynolds, who will review policy 003 for us.
Thank you. The next couple policies I propose are getting back to the 00. So this policy is just an update as far as our current practice. The only adjustment that you'll find in language is making sure that we change regulations where it's noted as far as updates from PSBA to guidelines. Also from a wordsmithing piece, we've just updated annual plan to our annual board goals. And the rest of the policy remains intact.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on policy, the changes to policy 003. Laura?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that's 4-0. Now, Dr. Reynolds will review policy 004, membership.
This policy, again, is taking a look at updates for training requirements and the language that reflects that, as well as there's 1.2 note for a temporary vacancy should it occur on the board due to military service. So if you can see after the first page, there's just some small language changes as far as pronoun usage. In vacancies, there's an addition for temporary vacancy for active military service. So it just outlines as far as the process for the board, what that should look like. Same process, it's just spelling out a vacancy due to military service. And if we go down to expenses, there's a note there when attendance has been authorized for the board. That's when we have participation for conferences or any travel. And on page 4, this is a change as far as training requirements. These requirements we've received as far as updates from PSBA, so it outlines our main areas as far as new or appointed school directors, and then also training requirements as far as re-election or reappointed, which has those 4 categories listed there. And to Mr. Gillen, for the question that you noted, I will contact you or have a member of our team contact you to follow up for your question specifically regarding trauma-informed practices.
Malia, would it be good to note also for these training requirements, those of us elected in 2021, we were actually subject to these already. So this isn't just new to the policy, but this has been in practice now for 2 years.
Just an update. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Any other comments or questions by the committee or the board? Okay, we will go ahead then and vote on policy number 004. Laura?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that's 4-0. Dr. Reynolds will now review policy 005, organization.
Moving right along for this one, this policy addresses our committee items. It also, so this policy has 2 points. One for organization, how the board is organized, as well as for one of the things that we reviewed in this policy is that it was missing an administrative guideline, so we incorporated them as well. So if we walk through 005, the first change we have is under order, changing that from judge to official power, so that's listed there. We also have some pronoun changes. For board committees, we added policy review because that is a new committee to the board. And that policy 005 stays intact.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Any questions or comments from anybody on the board or committee?
One quick question actually on that one. In the organization meeting, and if I forget this already, pardon me, but it says that we'll get by mail the organizational information. Do we still do it by mail or electronic distribution? Because that might be additional correction that we want to clarify, or at least broaden to be inclusive of electronic mail. So I literally just saw it and thought it.
Are you gonna?
I know that, I think 2 years ago, we actually did do it by mail, and then this last year, so it just might be good to catch that up.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and vote on, Dr. Reynolds will make that adjustment
Yes.
to the second
I agree with
reading.
that. Thank you.
And we'll go ahead now and vote on policy 005, organization. Laura?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, that's 4-0 for policy 005. We also have Dr. Reynolds reviewing the new administrative guideline, 00AG1 board organization guidelines. Is that included in?
Thank you. So this accompanies policy 005. So we noted on the last policy, it referenced an administrative guideline, but it didn't outline it. So we wanted to have it outlined, particularly for standing committees, their functions. So it lists for each committee that we have as far as a board committee, it lists the purpose of the committee, the expectations of that committee. As an AG, because this is the first AG that we have, that's why we're presenting it for approval this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. I do have a question. Under the Personnel Committee, the other committees list, and I know personnel is handled differently because of the need for confidentiality, but the other committees list that they have 4 board members, and one of these members is a chairperson, but under Personnel Committee, that is not listed. So do we need a little more clarification on the Personnel Committee?
I'm trying to see where that. Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at people, sorry. I see that.
Yeah, because even policy does have it, so.
Yes. Mhm.
So even though often only the chair of the committee is involved in the information and some decision-making because of the confidentiality, we still have the 4 members who, and, you know, every couple of months, the personnel committee all meets together.
Understood, so I'll take that first piece that we have for all the other committees and I'll add that to the top. My apologies, I was looking at the wrong one, I'm like, I see it, it wasn't
Thank
the right
you.
one.
Got it, thank you. Yeah, we're going through a lot today, tonight's a little confusing. So any other comments or questions on the new administrative guideline 005 HE1? And so we do need to vote on this. I'll go ahead, Laura,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
and myself, so that's 4-0, and that's including the change under Personnel Committee. So Dr. Reynolds will now review policy 006, meeting.
So this one actually, it's up to you, Ms. Fleming, because we're close to time. The 6s are together, so we could move them for the next meeting, or we can start with one. We're not going to be able to get through all of them this evening, so we could pause here to transition for property and finance, or we can get through one and then move the rest.
If we could we just go ahead and do 006, because I do have a comment on that, I don't want to forget.
So 006 is taking a look at meetings. We did have some adjustments for the first section. We just had some minor changes as far as where and alignment for laws, state regulations, and board procedures for presiding officers. You'll note the change as far as instead of plurality, we have majority. And then what is outlined as far as where no such majority is achieved on the first vote, a second vote shall cast for the 2 candidates who receive the greatest number of votes. So that's just in the case of a presiding officer. For the agenda frame, there were no changes there. And throughout the policy, we just had a couple of revisions.
So is it a reasonable assumption that what was formerly referred to as board retreats, planning sessions, orientation, and then district task force meetings, that is all now under the header of other?
Yes. And I'm looking just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And it's work sessions. Yes, that's it for 006. The main thing was in the first section under presiding officers.
I do have a comment, and now with all these papers in front of me, I don't have where I have it marked down, but the term quorum is used in here, and do we have in a policy a definition for a quorum? Anywhere?
We started, I think it goes back to our first policy in the 00s, but I will need to check that. I'm going to highlight it to say that if it's not identified as voc.
It's at the beginning of the policy. A quorum is the majority of the members of the board.
Okay, so.
Unless there are certain things where it's called out where for voting, you sometimes need a vote of the whole board as opposed to just a quorum of the board. But a quorum is, in your case, it would, with a board of 9, it would be 5.
Okay, so anytime we're using quorum in any of the policies, we're just talking about having 5 of the 9 board members.
Unless it's called out as something different.
Okay, so, thank you.
But a quorum of a committee is different than a quorum of the board.
Correct.
So I just want to be clear for the public record that there is a different number. It's not 5 for a committee because we only have 4 members in a committee. So 2 or more are correct quorum on that.
Okay. All right, do we have any other questions? Any other questions on policy 006? Okay, we can go ahead and vote on that, and then after that we can move on to property and planning. So Laura?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that's 4-0 for policy 006 on voting. And that will conclude our policy committee meeting tonight, and we'll move on to property and planning. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds and Mr. Wagner.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to get started with tonight's property and finance meeting. First item on the agenda, as always, is public comment.
There are 2 registrants for public comment. Persons making to wish public comment were required to properly register for the designated start time of tonight's 6:30 p.m. meeting. When the public commenters' names are called, I ask that they please approach the podium and begin by stating their first name, last name, and municipality. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. The 3-minute time clock will be projected on the screens located throughout the room. The board asks that all commentary be directed to the board as a whole. Public comment may be interrupted or terminated if the commentary exceeds 3 minutes or if the commentary is obscene and/or threatening in nature. All persons attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves with decorum and civility. In addition to refraining from abusive and profane remarks, please be respectful of all persons in public comments, including those comments and opinions that may differ from your own. Distracting and disruptive behavior or other actions which interfere with the orderly conduct of this public meeting will not be tolerated. I'll now call the first speaker, Rachel Langen.
Hello, Rachel Langen, Borough of Westchester. I have some suggestions for reducing the cost of right-to-know requests. But first, a quick background on right-to-know, not so much for the board, but for anybody who might be listening or be watching. The right-to-know law in Pennsylvania states, and I'm quoting, that all state and local government agency records are presumed to be public. This means that if an agency wants to withhold a record, it must prove that it is entitled to do so under the right-to-know law. The Office of Open Records makes it simple and free for a requester to appeal an agency denial, end quote. This means that the district documents are public information and the district is obligated to fulfill right-to-know requests. So now for my suggestions. 1, if there is more transparency up front, then there would be a reduced dependency on right-to-know requests. The district should be more transparent and make more documents available to the public. 2, stop sending every request to legal review and only send sensitive documents to legal. Sending every right-to-know to legal is an expensive endeavor, and it is not necessary for every right-to-know to be reviewed by the lawyers. Legal review is done at the district's prerogative, and this often results in the lawyers denying requests and/or withholding and redacting information unnecessarily. Number 3, reduce costs associated with appeals. When I receive a right-to-know response as the requester, the information is almost always redacted in some form, and many times the information has been unnecessarily redacted. How do I know it's been unnecessarily redacted? Because when this happens, I file an appeal with the PA Office of Open Records, and an appeals officer determines whether the district must provide the redacted information. I've won on appeal about 50% of the time. This means that the district is paying the lawyers twice, once to redact, and then a second time to unredact at the direction of the appeals officer. So you could reduce your legal fees by about 50% just by sending fewer documents to legal, and this would also result in 50% fewer appeals. The district can and should consider ways to reduce costs, and I hope you'll consider implementing these suggestions. Thank you.
The next commenter is Peggy Schmidt.
Hello, Peggy Schmidt, East Goshen Township. The financial documents are cumbersome and tricky to navigate. In the future, I'd ask the board to consider putting these documents in PDF form instead of photocopying so they'd be more easily searchable. That's all, just please consider this for future agendas. Thank you.
That was it with public comments, correct? Just the two?
Correct.
Yep, thanks, Amanda. All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of last month's Property and Finance meeting minutes on February 21st. Nobody's approached me as of yet with any comments, but does anybody in the committee have any comments on the minutes?
No.
All right, seeing none, we'll vote. Stacy?
Yes.
Karen?
Yeah.
Karen?
Oh, we're Karen.
Yeah, I'll go in order. We'll go in order left to right.
Yes.
Thank you. We're good for nothing as the minutes as written. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Scully's going to review the budget forecast model as of this month.
Great, thanks, Gary. I'm going to review the forecast model for the month of March. I do not have many changes, and as those of you who have already seen the forecast model, you can see where we are with the tax increase. Michael, page 9, up you have it. In looking at our expenditures for this year as well as our expenditures for next year, both of them have a little bit of reductions that we can take. I took the reductions in next year as opposed to the current year because next year's reductions will then carry through the other 4 years of the model. Any reductions I take in the current year don't follow through for the model. So that is the only reason why I took these expenditures in the 23-24 year. So I took a reduction in benefits for $500,000 and in other services for transportation. I will tell you that was taken for next year. That is the savings in the fuel bid. So when we actually did our fuel bid, which was done in February, we had put the budget together at $4.03 a gallon for gas. It came in at $2.86, which was a phenomenal bid award for gas at this time to come in at $2.86. And no, we cannot use any of that for personal use. So we did lock in at $2.86 for 275,000 gallons for next year, and that is a savings of a little over $400,000, $450,000. So that is a cost savings for next year's budget, budgets. The benefits was a combination of this year's savings and next year's savings, but I put it all into next year so that we drive the model down in future years. Michael, if you could go back to page 7. So again, I had no changes for 23-24. The changes that I took were for 24-25. Regardless of the year that I take them, they impact the millage increase for next year, and I would say that the millage increase is set at 0 for next year. So we, as of March, are at a 0% tax increase for Chester County for next year. We are at a very, very, very slight increase, 0.1% at Delaware County. There is nothing I can do to get that down. That is just a matter of the step value. I will tell you that the average increase on an average residential home in Delaware County is going to be $2.83. But we are at a 0, so I will be presenting a preliminary budget next month with a 0% tax increase for residents of Chester County, 0.1% increase for Delaware County. I do believe the administration will find additional revenue. I know we will find additional revenues. I believe we will also find additional savings for this year. As I have always done in the past, my recommendation is going to be, if we look at 24-25 and 25-26, both of those years do signify that we will need a tax increase to stay at what we have as our assumptions in the model. I would make the recommendation that any savings that we have this year would be rolled forward for the tax increase, or to reduce the tax increase in the 24-25 school year. You do not need to make a decision on that right now, but that is going to be my recommendation, that we go with a 0% tax increase for this year. Any additional savings that are found, we would use for 24-25 tax increase. So preliminary numbers were at about $30 million of a deficit for 24-25. I can honestly tell the board those numbers need to be tweaked, and they will also come down. That is not where we will be, because any revenues that are recognized this year will also compound and be recognized the next year as well.
30 million in next year's deficit?
30 million in 24-25. Out of that, I know right now we brought in $6 million of additional current real estate taxes this year based on the assessed values of our properties. I have not changed the assessed value of properties for 24-25 either, so that $6 million will automatically carry over in 24-25. So that $30 million is already down to 24, I guess the reality of that. Those changes will all be made in August.
John, I think we're in excellent shape with what we just went through with the 0% for Chester County, the 0.1% for Delaware County. And thank you for explaining how we handle the funds moving forward for future years. Just as a refresher reminder, at a very high level for the committee and the board, just speak to the plan out for the next 2 months, just real briefly.
So you have a preliminary budget needs to be approved in April, and then your final budget under school board policy needs to be approved by June 30th. The tax bills also need to be out by July 1st, so we cannot approve and have 38,000 tax bills done overnight. So we have normally approved our budget in May. So the timeline that we have in the board budget timeline was that a preliminary budget we presented in April, final budget would be presented in May. I do not anticipate that there would be much change between your preliminary budget and your final budgets that you already had as a of tax bills.
Thank you, John. I just wanted to make sure everybody was in line with that. I guess for the committee, again, this is a review as we normally do on a monthly basis. Did anybody in the committee or the board have any questions on the budget forecast model and where we ended currently?
No, other than I would like to commend Mr. Scully on the financial management of the district.
All right, thank you, John. We'll move forward. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Scully is going to review this, approval of naming of the school district facilities.
I will. There was a request that was put together back in 2021, I believe. Dr. Nissen might be able to help me with that. Although this application is dated March of 2023, it actually came forward in 2021. As we were building Greystone or dedicating Greystone, Dr. Fagan had made the request to the administration to bring forward to the board that the library area be named after Dr. Scanlon, and it's the Dr. James R. Scanlon Student Learning Center. At that time, Dr. Scanlon was still an employee of the district, and according to the school board policy, you cannot name any piece of the properties that are owned by the district after a sitting employee of the district. So it was tabled at that point and has been tabled since. And Dr. Fagan has brought it back to Dr. Messick. On behalf of Dr. Messick, I bring it forward to the committee. So the recommendation would be to, for me to recommend to the committee, I need 2 members of the committee to move it forward, that we would go back and do a cost analysis of what it would cost to put things together. It's going to be a black. I don't believe there's going to be much cost associated with it, but that is our policy. I would bring that back next month, at which point the committee would then need to move it forward to the board. So the request on the table from Dr. Fagan is to name the library, which is currently unnamed, to name it the Dr. James Scanlon Student.
So if everybody followed that, Mr. Scully would come back the following month with an estimate of what that would cost. Yeah. Anybody on the committee or the board have any questions on the naming of Greystone's library? Okay. So we'll vote. Do you want us to vote for that
I
to
just
proceed
need
with the
2
cost?
committee members to
Yeah.
tell me that it's okay to move forward. So
Yeah.
we need to poll your 4 committee members.
Yeah. So we'll just go around the room then. Stacy?
Yes.
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm good too, so we'll just wait for your update next month.
Thank you. So there will be nothing on the board agenda for this month.
That's
I will
correct.
come back to property and finance next month.
Yeah, and approval at that point, and that goes forward. Correct. All right, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the update of the right to know request.
Correct. And the next item I have is just an informational update, and it is probably, I best call it a working process. Last month, I had requested additional funds for both the current year and next year to help offset some of the administrative costs as well as legal costs for our right to know request due to an influx of right to know requests. At that point, I had suggested to the board that maybe, at least on a quarterly basis, we discuss the number of requests that are coming through, just so you have a general idea of the number of requests coming through. This is very vague. It doesn't have a lot of information on it. I will say right up front, it does not have requesters' names on here. The intent of what I want to present to the board has nothing to do with people. It has to do with the amount of work the right to know requests are on the district at this point. So I'm open to comments. I'll just go through it quickly. I'm open to format changes, whatever anyone is looking. If this is enough information, I'm sorry, Michael, it's page 43. My apologies. Just open for what the committee has recommendations on changes or format. So looking at July was easy. We had 1 requester, so going across the top, you have number of requesters, number of individual requests, total requests. So number of requesters, we had 1 requester with 1 request. Obviously, 1 is 1, they were on leases. So that was just the month of July. Not much, no legal fees, nothing incurred for the month of July. In the month of August, I had 5 requesters that had 1 request each. And under topics, the general topics were information on grants, student data, treasurer's report, training documentations, and Easter's expenses. A lot of our requests that are coming in are for training documentations. They are the ones that tend to be a little more work because a lot of our training exercises will have hyperlinks to other things, yet the hyperlink may not be there, so we have to search to find the PDF. So that's where we're having a little bit of issues. I will advise the board when I get done of process moving forward because we are putting a process in place. Did you want me together now? Or? Okay. And I don't need to go through this entire report. I mean, the board has it. So for the month of August, we had 7 requesters with 6 individual requests for a total of 10. Staff time is about 46 hours, but the legal fees associated just in that month were $21,000. So that was 4 appeals. We had 3 that were appealed, so we provided the information, and then it was appealed, which then goes back to legal to that information's been redacted or not redacted. Month of September, I had 6 requesters with 6 individual requests for a total of 10. You'll see that the cost on that was $6,200. October, I can go through each month if you want me to, or the information is there. From the period of July 1st through the end of February, we have spent almost $60,000 on legal fees through various legal firms to redact information. So all of that information and all that redacting is not just on return of Urban Freeze. There are 4 or 5 attorneys that are used for various things that need to be redacted. Some of it is personnel, some of it is construction-based, some of it is through student IEP-based things. Obviously, all of that needs to be redacted. So we have spent a little over $60,000 so far this year. I had budgeted $60,000, which is why I requested additional money last month. So my intent is to provide this on a quarterly basis for informational purposes to the board. I don't know that we need to have a full discussion. That's completely up to the board, but how is the committee and or the board with the format?
I would just say, I'll just start with comments and we'll go around the room. I think from a quarterly basis seems appropriate. I think letting the board know the quantity of those, what they are at a topic level is good. And if you need to drill down or have other discussions, we'll do that, concurrently. I'll just go around the room for anybody else that has any questions. Feel free. Go ahead, Stacey.
I do.
Yeah.
So, in the interest of simplicity, I'm going to suggest that rather than this aggregation of topics, right, because they could vary, right?
Yeah.
And you're sort of grouping them by kind of logical association with each other. So I think it would be great if we could have some basic buckets that are defined, that maybe you can attach then the topics that are associated with those buckets, so that you could just redefine, or you can add or amend to what's in that bucket and just have the summary of hours and appeals and dollars at the bucket level.
Okay.
That may make it a little less cumbersome, and I think it'll make it a little easier for people to understand month over month how the trends could be changing in the, or quarterly, however else we get it, to better understand what's equivalent in January versus December versus November, because when the topics change, right, it's like, are we really comparing apples to apples? Where are we seeing things spike? It just might simplify for everybody.
To quickly answer, just to give you a quick answer, the spikes we're seeing are the months in which there's in-service trainings. So we're getting a lot of requests for documentation for our in-service trainings, which would be, there's an agenda, so if there's an agenda, then all the attachments that come along with the agenda, which also a lot of it is copyright. So then we end up having to go back to the originator of the document to find out what the copyright restrictions are. But I would say majority of our requests right now are based on in-service trainings.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
Anybody else in the committee or board?
I do. Mr. Scully, can you explain why the requests are all sent to legal?
They're not all sent to legal. The ones that we question whether the information, anything that is asking for data on a child, a student, or anything that is not our own internal documents, we will send out to see if they need to be redacted.
Okay, so not every request
Not
is
every
sent
one.
out to legal, and it's a judgment call based on your experience.
Correct. I will tell you, every right to know request that we get is sent out internally to the people that we're responsible for it, and there is a copy sent to our attorneys. That is not a direction to work, and our attorneys do not do work on that. It's just so you know this is the right to know request. That is then followed up with a request from someone from the administration to someone in Amanda's office. Can you help us with this right to know? There's things in there that we think may need to be redacted.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. Scully, I appreciate all the information that you've given about the right to know requests. I also think it's very important that the school board knows about this on a consistent basis. And I think it's very important for the public to know the information. Thank you very much, and I support the process moving forward.
Thank you.
And then, John, we'll just adjust this as necessary with any comments as people have as we get familiar with it and look at it to whatever extent we
And
can.
any board members or committee members, if they have a recommendation, feel free to email me and we can bring it back.
Correct. Yeah.
But I just follow up with something though, because I did
Please
start
do.
to allude to it with Stacy. I thought your question was going to be something else. We have put a
Tell me
process.
what I missed.
Yeah, we put a process together for right to know. So I will tell you, we have been operating as we've always operated, and you do your in-service trainings, you do your things, and right to know is something that is fairly new to the district in the last few years. We are putting a task force together that is looking at preparing documents, especially related to in-service training, so that we are following a template so that in the documents themselves, hyperlinks will be attached and/or a PDF will be attached. What's happening right now is if I did an in-service training, I put an agenda together, yet my information might be in a different directory. When the right to know request comes in, then we need to find the directory that people have stored things in. People were not putting their in-service trainings together thinking right to know request. So we have a task force put together, and we will be meeting with our management team in April, because we have in-service trainings and other management trainings that will be happening all summer long, so that we're following a template and all the information is stored, which will save a lot of staff time of people digging to find where their information is.
Thanks for bringing that forward, as that was the theme, and I think that'll be a great thing that we're implementing going forward in reduced time. And that was information only to the committee and to the board tonight. All right, thank you, Mr. Scully, for the updates tonight. Next on the agenda is Mr. Burster, who's going to give some updates. We do have the 23-24 capital fund project awards.
Correct. So the first piece of this evening for me would be the capital fund project awards. The Facilities and Operations Department is seeking approval to award for these projects, which are currently 23-24 capital project awards. The first one is the Penwood roof replacement that had previously been approved with a budget of $315,500. We're seeking to award that to Garvey Work LLC for a total cost of $261,114. I will say that on this roof specifically, we moved away from our previous process. We typically use one specific type of roofing material. This roof, we were able to reduce down our cost significantly by going a different direction. So we're still maintaining the same 20-year warranty that we would typically have. We're still maintaining a really good quality roof, but we were able to save a significant amount of money by changing directions. The next project is the Stetson boiler replacement, which had an original budget of $280,000, which again, we're asking for an award of $78,100. In the same regard, we didn't change materials on this project, but what we did do is we sought out from several other vendors costs, and we were able to find a significant savings by using Divine, who we have used in the past and very successfully. The next project is the Stetson replacement of the emergency generators and controls, which we had an original budget of $110,000 for, and we're seeking an award of $46,671. And I will just state that the projects underneath of that are also generator replacements, all of which we are looking to award to Power Premium Services. That is not a company we have used in the past, but I will say that they are expecting the same equipment as the vendor that we had used, and we're seeing a 60 to 100% reduction. So it's a significant amount of savings. So the original Stetson project that I mentioned had a project budget of $110 with a $46,600 award. The Fugate Middle School replacement with a project budget of $135,000 with a $59,796 award. And the East Bradford emergency generator replacement with a $105,000 budget with a $36,219 award. So all told, with all of these projects this evening, we've been able to really see seek out multiple pricings from different vendors and have been able to be creative in driving down prices, which is hopefully going to afford us an opportunity in the future to take some of the savings and apply it to different projects for the future.
You know, Wayne, we appreciate your effort and the facilities' effort and the diligence here on getting these, negotiating, finding new vendors and negotiating prices and finding way under quite a bit reduced from the budget. So I think that's excellent as we go forward, especially in a challenging time now where some of the construction costs and procurement costs have been high. So thank you for the diligence there. Anybody else have any questions in the committee?
I do. First of all, great job. Really well done. I know a question I get sometimes asked is how often are we able to source from vendors like inside of our community? Not asking you to answer that right now, just something we might want to footnote or highlight when we do. In terms of like the award amount and the savings, like you just mentioned multiply savings to other projects, so this is a little bit of a finance question, right? Is like when we have budget allocations for these and we have such excellent work done that achieves what we need to do at essentially a third of our budget, how do we represent that? Like where can the public understand the reallocation of that money as we identify other capital opportunities? Does that make sense?
Yep. So we actually go through an approval process. We seek information back from the principals every year. We seek information back from our various supervisors. We look at where our facility stands as a whole, you know, all the buildings. And we have an approval process, and ultimately we assign monies to each project, right? And then ultimately there's a hierarchy of approval. So the intent would be to take any savings that we have and ultimately then fund the next project on the list. So the hope would be to be able to retain those monies and then reallocate them to another project.
And I think that's the key, when you pull the next project forward. The budget's a not to exceed cost for that year. And what you're able to do is pull the next priority item forward that we looked at as a committee prior.
Correct. And just for clarification purposes, before we would create that project, we would put that project budget together, we would come back to the board, we would reassign that a new project number, and we would move forward with the board's approval on the budget.
Stacy, to answer your question, we brought back to a public meeting for the Department of Finance with the request to add additional projects to the already approved list, whether it be capital projects or capital reserve.
Perfect, thank you.
Anybody else on the committee or board have any questions on these projects? All right, so basically now for the Property and Finance Committee, we're voting on an approval of the 23-24 Capital Fund project awards as stated by Mr. Burster. Stacey?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And Karen?
Yes.
Thank you. It's 4-0. We'll move that forward. Mr. Burster is now going to review the 23-24 Capital Reserve project awards.
Okay, so for the capital reserve projects, the first project that we're looking at is the district-wide fencing, which is something that was new this year that we started to put together. Actually, last year we started some district-wide projects, but this is the first year we're doing the fencing project. So the intent was to put a dollar value for a budget, this particular project being $75,000, and then ultimately do fencing repairs up to that amount of money. So last month I had brought some repairs forward. This month I'm bringing back some additional repairs. So the first piece seeking to award would be to S Fencing Company for an amount of $8,979. And the balance for this month would be for FenceSense for $44,250. This would offer us an opportunity to do fencing repairs at East High School, Ruston High School, Pierce Middle School, Fugate Middle School, Facilities and Operations Building, Thornhill Elementary School, and still leaving a fund balance in that project of about $13,000, where we will continue to look at the current fencing and determine where the need is for either new fencing to be installed or for replacement to be done. The next project is our district-wide flooring project. And this is again a budget of $75,000. We're seeking approval to award to PC Curry Flooring Company for the amount of $63,237. It just so happens to be that we were able to identify enough work at the East Campus to satisfy the majority of this budget amount. We again will still continue to look to find projects that we can use the additional $11,700 that is left in this budget for other locations. The The next project is the Penwood Music Room flooring, which is also seeking to award the PC Curry Flooring Company. The original project budget was $34,000. The project came in looking for an award amount of $26,545. So a little bit under budget there. And then the last project here is the Westtown Thornbury Public Announcement Intercom System, seeking to award to Intellicom Systems with an original budget of $35,000 and an actual total cost of $33,975.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Did anybody in the committee have any questions on any of these items?
No question on the project specifically. I'm just, once again, for everybody's sake, real quick, difference between fund and reserve, because the last agenda item was capital fund, this one's capital reserve. I feel like this is something people get very confused about.
So capital fund is borrowed money. So that is bond issued money. That is for items that normally have a longer lifespan than the bond issue would be. We use a threshold of 15 to 20 years. So anything that's going to have a lifespan above 15 to 20 years, we will use bond borrowed funds for. So they're normally our bigger construction projects. I call the projects that are in our capital reserve more of a maintenance type of project, meaning they don't have a long lifespan. The funding from the capital reserve fund is a general fund contribution. So there is millage in place in our general fund to fund these capital reserve type of projects. The reason they're not charged to general fund is because they have a lifespan that extends longer than the current year.
Thank you. I feel like we never redefine, like we need to keep consistently reminding people of those definitions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, Mr. Scully, as we come forward every year with that, the listing of each of those, we talk about it at that point on each of the two funds, and we'll clarify that as we go forward when we establish that list at the beginning of the school year. All right, this is an item for approval, so approval of the 23-24 capital reserve projects. Stacy?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
All right, it's 4-0, we're good on that.
Gary, can I move them both for the only two agenda items going through to the board? Can I move them both forward as
Consent, yes.
Both budgeted.
That is appropriate, that's correct, thank you. The last item on the agenda tonight, Mr. Burster is going to discuss and provide us an update for the annual Act 39, which is the water quality testing.
Yeah, so in June of 2020, in June of 2018, the Act 39 was passed, which is a lead in drinking water act, informing and asking schools to begin testing lead levels in drinking water in schools. So, and basically we have two opportunities here. One is to test at each site every year, or one is to discuss at a public meeting. So one or the other must be done on an annual basis. Last year, we did testing at each of our sites. Our testing was above and beyond lead. We tested for copper, biofilms, chlorofilms, other potential hazards in the drinking water, simply because, at least in my time here, we had not done that in the past, so we wanted to make sure that we were being diligent in doing those testings. We do testings pretty regularly with our construction projects, so anytime we have a disturbance in our water systems, we then do a testing, but we have historically not actually done testing on an annual basis. Last year, with our testing results, in fact, in almost every school, the numbers came through so low that there was actually not even a number to report back to us. The highest level of lead that we've seen in any of our buildings last year was 1.4% per billion, 1.4 parts per billion, right? 15 parts per billion is the part where you start being concerned. So you're looking at about 9% of the level where anybody would be concerned. And just to be, transparent on the whole process, that includes right from the moment that the water leaves the well to the water makes it to the point of distribution, right? So that includes all township lines, that includes any transition lines, and that includes any lines in the building. So having traveled all of those ways, we only actually had one of our buildings that showed a level that was even a measurable level, which was, like I said, at about 9% of the level that we would be concerned about. And even looking at copper and other means, significantly below any levels that were of concern. So we opted to not test again this year, just for the sake of the expense of testing. Our intent would be to test every 2 to 3 years to make sure that we're still following through with the process and trying to do best practices, but not ultimately to use the resources on something that frankly we know was good last year, and there's been no change to the process.
All right, thank you, Mr. Verster, for bringing that to our awareness. Did anybody on the committee or board have any questions on the water testing update? Okay. All right, that concludes today's Property and Finance meeting. Thank you.
Ready? I now call to order the March 20th, 2023 school board meeting of the Westchester Area School District Board of Directors. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. We'll do it ourselves tonight. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I went back and looked in some of the history, and the last special meeting I found was 2014, where we named a new person to the school board. So at this point, Mr. Luca, if we could take roll.
Vice President Bevilacqua.
Here.
Director Chester.
Here.
Director Dietrich.
Here.
Director Jernell.
Here.
Director Fleming.
Here.
Director Herman.
Here.
Director Tierney. President Tierney.
Yes, here.
Director Walmsley.
Here. All right, has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, Madam President, there are 7 registrants. So this will now be the time for public comment on agenda items for the special board meeting. Persons wishing to make public comment on agenda items were required to properly register prior to the designated start time of tonight's 7 p.m. meeting. When the public commenters' names are called, I ask that they please approach the podium and begin by stating their first and last name and municipality. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. The 3-minute time clock will be projected on the screens located throughout the room. The board asks that all commentary be directed to the board as a whole. Public comments may be interrupted or terminated if the commentary exceeds 3 minutes or if the commentary is obscene and/or threatening in nature. All persons attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves with decorum and civility. In addition to refraining from abusive and profane remarks, please also be respectful to all persons in public comments, including those comments and opinions that may differ from your own. Distracting or disruptive behaviors or other actions which interfere with the orderly conduct of the public meeting will not be tolerated. I'll now call the first speaker. The first speaker is Beth Ann Rossica.
Thank you. Beth Ann Rostico, Westchester Borough. I am making public comments this evening in advance of the application process, as it was unclear whether each candidate would have an opportunity to speak. I imagine that some believe my application is an audacious act, as I have been vocal about board decisions over the past few years. If the board truly wants to be transparent, if the board truly wants to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, if the board truly wants to partner with parents and community members, then my skills and experiences would be a positive addition to the board. I'm a registered libertarian. To the best of my knowledge, we have never had a libertarian board member. As a 30-year resident of the district, I've attended more board meetings over the last several years than any other applicant, and quite possibly more than any other applicants combined. I've been actively involved with the district for over 11 years, serving on the PTO, PTOC, and a volunteer coach. I've also served on a number of district-sponsored community task force. If you are seeking to replace Kate Shaw's skill set, my skills are the closest match. I have a PhD in education and worked in the human services field for over 25 years, advocating on behalf of at-risk and marginalized children and families. I worked with LGBTQ children before many knew what those letters stood for. I served as a federal programs monitor for the Department of Education and as president of Advancing Evidence-Based Practices. I started my own consulting business several years ago that serves a diverse clientele across the country. I've read the entire public school code and understand the duties of a school board member. I believe that one of the most important duties of a director is to hire and supervise the superintendent. The reason I am interested in this vacancy is to help address the learning loss of our students, especially our most vulnerable ones. Transparency is incredibly important to me and many parents, and my appointment to the board would signal that the board is open to divergent opinions. I also want to help to address the imbalance between our administrator and teacher salaries. Our teacher salary scale is one of the lowest in the county. Tonight, I come to ask you for your consideration and to give my commitment to work tirelessly on behalf of all 12,000 plus students in our district. In my consulting business, I work with a variety of people and have encountered a number of challenging experiences. I always tell my clients that you cannot complain about a situation unless you are willing to do something about it. Today, I stand ready to work with each and every board member to ensure that every child has access to the highest quality education. Thank you for your consideration.
The next speaker is Mike Winterode.
Good evening, Mike Winterode, West Whiteland. I stand here tonight in support of Beth Ann Rosica for Westchester School Board vacancy. For her entire professional career, Ms. Rosica has been a tireless advocate for all children in our district. Her 30-plus year career has been dedicated to the support of marginalized, low-income, and minority students who may not be able to advocate for themselves. She is passionate about her academic excellence for every child, and she has influenced policy and practice through her work in the human services field. It's safe to say there are few residents in the Commonwealth who understand Pennsylvania's school code as much as she does. We can trust with 100% certainty that Ms. Rosica will never let politics cloud her judgment as a school board director. And how do I know that? She's proven this to all of us already. Despite being a lifelong Democrat, in 2020, Ms. Rosica did not hesitate to buck the party line by speaking out about the harmful effects of school lockdowns and masking. If only all of the Republican school board members at the time had been so brave. If the school district truly wants to obtain the services of a highly qualified candidate while also encouraging a diversity of opinions, there is no better candidate for you to choose than Beth Ann Rosica. Thank you.
The next speaker is Daniel Gillen.
Remember this time. Daniel Gillen, Thornbury Township. Good evening again. A few comments on tonight's selection. Just general preferences I have for the candidate that is eventually selected, 10 on the list. Number one is that candidate puts parents' interests first and foremost and supports the Parents' Bill of Rights legislation currently pending before Congress. Number two, the candidate should favor equality of opportunity over equality of outcome. Number three, the candidate should keep or want to keep gratuitous and sexually explicit materials out of our school libraries and curriculum. Number four, the candidate should keep or want to keep anti-American and divisive critical race theory principles from making their way into the classroom. Number five, the candidate should want to keep masks off our children forever. Number six, the candidate should want to object to any long-term school closures based on unscientific evidence. Number seven, the candidate should want to prevent transformative SEL, social emotional learning, from ever being implemented in the classrooms, including the implementation of new materials from companies like Second Step which are inherently intertwined with transformative social emotional learning. Number 8, the candidate should want to keep confusing gender identity principles out of the classrooms. Number 9, the candidate should want to protect women's sports and protect women's facilities from male use. Number 10, the candidate should be skilled, know how to ask questions, know how to probe, and keep the administration accountable. The one candidate of the list tonight who I am familiar with is Beth Ann Rossica, and like the commenter before me, I also believe she's highly qualified for the position and perhaps the most qualified. She's by far the most engaged community member. She regularly made comments as soon as I started following school board agendas a year and a half ago. She frequently publishes on school issues and media outlets. She was right on masking. She was right on lockdowns and school closures and the unnecessary learning loss. She has opinions that are diverse from many members on this board. She's credentialed with a PhD in education. She's smart and she writes well. Now, the recently failed petition is not lost on me, and certainly the animus that it may have created is not lost on me. I make this suggestion in spite of that petition, not because of that. And it should also not be lost on you, as the commenter previously said, that Ms. Rossico was, not so long ago, on the same side of the political fence as many of you, and perhaps had voted for you in past elections. Installing Ms. Rossica, in spite of this understandable animus, is an opportunity perhaps to mend fences and would be a monumental step in bringing this divided school community together, and I think you should consider taking it. Thank you.
The next commenter is Rachel Langan.
Hello, me again. Rachel Langan, Borough of Westchester. As you know, the Public School Code, Article 3, Section 315 states that when a board member resigns, the remaining members of the board by majority vote shall fill such vacancy within 30 days. But the school code is silent on how this voting process actually plays out. I got the email, I saw on the website, people were supposed to submit their resumes and their questions, and it said that this would become public record. So when I emailed the board secretary to ask about the resumes and the questions, she said that those are not being provided. So this kind of points back to my earlier comment about right to know requests and the need for transparency. So if the district is not going to provide that information, then the only recourse is to put in a right to know to get that information. But the district had said already it would be public information. So how does one get that public information if it's not shared publicly, right? Like I would have to put in a right to know to get that. So it seems really frustrating to me as a taxpayer for like 30 minutes ago to like have all the complaining about the cost of right to knows, but then refusing to release documents that you said were going to be public. So not only did I expect to see resumes and answers to the questions for the 10 candidates, but I also expected that each candidate would have the opportunity to present their skill set to the board and to the public at this meeting. And when I asked about that in email, I was told that President Tiernan would explain all. So there was no answer like, yes, they'll get to have their say, or no, they won't. And I don't see on the agenda that everybody gets to speak. So again, that's just frustrating for me. I would like to see everybody have the opportunity to get to speak. I also expected to see some kind of rubric for scoring the resumes and the answers and the interviews. So as a school district, we expect our teachers to use rubrics to score students. So I'd expect the board to do the same and then to share this rubric with the public. And then lastly, if you appoint a candidate tonight who is on the ballot for November, and I believe that there are 3 candidates on the ballot seeking for the office, then you're essentially fast-tracking that candidate to the board and basically circumventing the will of the voters, not technically, but kind of in the spirit of it. So because of that, the public deserves for this process to be more transparent. We deserve to see the resumes, the answers to the questions. We deserve to hear the candidates speak, and I think that we deserve to see how and why you are choosing the candidate that you choose over all others. Thank you.
The next speaker is Amanda Greenberg.
Good evening, Amanda Greenberg, East Goshen. My comment's gonna seem a little silly because I am kind of speaking on the same topic, just not as eloquently. I just wanted to know why, in the spirit of transparency, the board did not put out any sort of documentation explaining the process of how you're going to be choosing the person who fills Director Shaw's seat, and why, so I wanted to know why that is not being put out there for the public, considering this is gonna affect our children and the district potentially for years to come. So that was just my question for you, is that why in the spirit of transparency you wouldn't put that out there? And being that it's not out there, it leaves room for people to make assumptions and things like that. And I just think that as a board, it might be more beneficial for you to eliminate those situations by simply putting out the information and being transparent. Thank you.
The next speaker is Alyssa McGrory.
My name is Alyssa McGrory. I live in East Bradford Township.
Ma'am, are you all right?
I'm so sorry. Yes,
That's
I'm
okay.
fine. I have this weird thing where
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm totally fine. I'm sorry. Well, after that, I just am up here to say that I support Beth Ann Rossica for the school board vacancy, for the same reasons that everyone else said so well. I don't understand the lack of transparency with this process, especially in light of everything that's going on over the past 3 years. Everything that's going on and is going on now. The lack of transparency is just shocking to me. So she's the candidate that's writing, and she's the candidate that's coming to every meeting. She's the person who's talking. I know where she stands on every issue. I don't know where anyone else who's running for this vacancy or possibly could be appointed for this vacancy. I don't know where they stand on anything. And I've looked. So I'm supporting her. Thank you.
The next speaker is Christopher Manos.
Good evening, everybody. Christopher Manos, East Bradford Township. Before I get started, I just want to say that this past weekend's Footloose performance was incredible, so thank you all for contributing to that excellence. Going forward, the Westchester Area School District should strive to achieve a virtuous, more balanced, and more diverse and inclusive range of views. As we evaluate candidates for the recent school board vacancy, we should consider a candidate with the experience who displays the following attributes. An individual who has relentlessly and tirelessly been an advocate for high-quality education and academic outcomes for children nationwide. A candidate with a 30-year career dedicated to supporting marginalized, low-income, and minority students who frequently can't advocate for themselves. An individual who is passionate about academic excellence and for every child. A candidate who has influenced policy and practice through work in the human services field. A candidate with significant management and leadership experience, as well as a vast array of experience managing, growing, and reorganizing businesses. A person who has served on the board of directors for advancing evidence-based practice, a national association committed to identifying and implementing best practices in the field of education and behavioral health care, and someone who holds a PhD in educational leadership with a focus on instructional strategies and inclusion for educationally disadvantaged students. Now, I don't know any of the other candidates who display these attributes, but there is one candidate that I know who does, and her name is Beth Ann Roxica. She's a PhD, and I would like all interested parents, educators, parties, and stakeholders to seriously consider Dr. Beth Ann Roxica for appointment to the Westchester Area School Board. Thank you.
There are no additional speakers.
All right, thank you all for getting up to speak on the same topic. And tonight, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Shaw's resignation. She resigned as a school board director effective February 28th, 2023, which is the reason we are here taking action to appoint a board director. So this is what I have to say in way of explanation. Tonight, we are here to appoint a school director to fill the vacancy created by Dr. Shaw's resignation. The school director appointed this evening will serve only until the first Monday of December 2023. Prior to tonight's meeting, school board members have been provided with the 10 candidate resumes and applications. So we have seen everybody's applications and all the answers to the questions and all their credentials. We received a schedule of things that started coming out 2 days after the last board meeting so that we could fill this vacancy within the required 30 days. Most of you have looked at the Code of 1949 and you know that what it says is when you have an absence, you have to fill it and you have 30 days to do so. We have in our policy, which you may have looked at tonight, that a vacancy shall occur by reason of death, resignation, removal, or otherwise. Such vacancy shall be filled in accordance with the school code and Sunshine Act and by appointment by a majority vote of the remaining members of the board within 30 days of the occurrence of the vacancy. The board members so appointed shall serve for the remainder of the unexpired term, or if earlier, until the first Monday in December after the first municipal election occurring more than 60 days after a vacancy occurred. So there we are. We are following the school code and we are following our own policy, and that is that this school board will ask a number of questions, consider resumes, and we will vote based on what we think is the best way to do that. All right. The process to appoint the school director tonight is as follows. Each board member will be having a ballot in a minute, listing the 10 candidates, which are the same 10 candidates listed on the agenda. Each board member will select 3 candidates from the list based on, not on conversation with each other, but on our study, and for some of us, 12 years of serving on the school board to understand how this team of 10 works together. The ballots will be collected and Ms. DeLuca will read the votes aloud so that you all know who we voted for. She will tally the votes and announce the top 3 candidates. In the event of a tie, a second vote may need to be taken. The 3 selected candidates will be asked to come forward and join us at the tables here in the front on either side of the podium, which we will move probably out of the line of sight. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves. This is not your final exam for your PhD candidacy here. You will have 5 minutes to introduce yourselves to us, tell us a little bit about your background that you want us to know, and describe how you see yourself working as a member of the team of 10, which, as you know by now, includes our superintendent, over the next 8 months. Once all the candidates have had the opportunity to speak, I will open up the floor for nominations from the board. When a candidate has been nominated, and if the nomination has been seconded, I will ask for a discussion, if there is any, and a vote. When a candidate has received the required 5 yes votes, we had a discussion earlier about what a quorum is, and that's what we need, 5 votes. The appointee will be welcomed to the board, and Carol DeLuca, who is a notary public, will administer the oath of office, and the person will come forward and join this team for the next 8 months. Now, believe me, the next 8 months may be one of the busiest that I have seen in many a year. Right now, we're lined up to do 4 or 5 things in April, maybe 6 or 7. More in May, graduations in June. It is a very, very big commitment of time and a very, very important process. So, board members, if we could have the ballots and complete them, that is how we are moving forward this evening. All they're doing is putting an X beside 3 names. They're not prioritizing.
I will read the votes. Director Dietrich voted for Alex Christie, Kim Mecca, Simon Rothke. Director Donnell voted for Bob Burkholder, Alex Christie, Simon Rothke. Director Walmsley voted for Bob Raffetto, Beth Ann Rossica, Nick Spangler. Vice President Bevilacqua voted for Bob Burkholder, Alex Christie, James Wilson. President Tiernan voted for Bob Burkholder, Alex Christie, James Wilson. Director Fleming voted for Bob Burkholder, Alex Christie, Kim Mecca. Director Herman voted for Bob Burkholder, Alex Christie, James Wilson. Director Chester voted for Bob Burkholder, Alex Christie, Simon Rothke. We have a tie for 3rd place between Simon Rothke and James Wilson. so we will need to take another ballot for just those two. So you are voting for either Simon Rookde or James Wilson. Vice President Bevilacqua voted for James Wilson. President Tiernan voted for James Wilson. Director Fleming voted for James Wilson. Director Herman voted for James Wilson. Director Chester voted for Simon Rookde. Director Durnell voted for Simon Rookde. Director Dietrich voted for Simon Rookde. Director Walmsley voted for James Wilson. Yeah. So our candidates, with a vote of receiving 7 votes on the first round, Alex Christie. Receiving 6 votes on the first round, Bob Burkholder. And receiving 5 votes on the second round of voting, James Wilson. Would those 3 candidates please come to the front?
That's fine. Just need to grab the chair.
I'll give up my chair. I'll give up my chair. I'll look for brownie points right away.
All right, I'm going to move from my left to my right, and so we will start with, you're Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
All right, we didn't know you. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. I would like to say at this time that when I read these resumes, and many of the board members commented in the same way, we wish that you all were running. All of you. Your credentials are great, your reasons for running are great, and we hope that the next time it is time to step up and do the work of running for office, that you will do so. Because you brought a lot to this whole process. We deeply appreciate that you are willing to make that commitment for our students for the next 8 months. The people who are running, of course, are committing to a 4-year process, but it was impressive what the things that you said and have done. So I look forward to seeing you again. Please start coming to meetings, all the rest of you who haven't been to so many meetings. And some of the suggestions that you made in your answers were exactly some of the things we do. We do work to balance the budget. We do talk about things like the wonderful programs that our teachers do for our kids, the things that happen in the schools, we bring them to school board meetings. So I encourage you all to come back. Now, Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
If you would simply tell us, and you have 5 minutes to do this, I don't care if the little thing is on, but if you could talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brought you here, and why, how you see yourself working with this group of 10, you would be the 10th person.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jim Wilson. I live in...
Can we get the
Oh,
microphone
yeah,
over here,
sorry.
please?
My name is Jim Wilson. I live in West Goshen Township. You know, my background, I'm a chemical engineer. I work for a chemical company. I'm a production manager there. I've been there 17 years. In my role, I've had, you know, a lot of experience in the production environment, setting budgets, balancing budgets, sticking to budgets, working with different departments, hearing a lot of different viewpoints to solve our issues in the production facility. I have 2 children. One's going to be a rising 3rd grader this year. One's going to be a rising kindergartner. What brought me here today was I really want to be involved in, you know, kind of their, you know, experience and helping to set that vision with the school district and be involved not just for them but for all of the district's children. I've coached youth sports for both of them in various levels. I'm passionately involved with the Cub Scouts. You know, so just, you know, in terms of working with everybody here, I think I can bring, you know, some experience in terms of sitting and listening to diverse viewpoints, asking a lot of questions, trying to understand the process, you know, offering my experience in that regard. It's a little bit about me.
Thank you. And you must be Mr. Burkholder.
That I am.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I must admit, I have no idea why I'm one of the 3 up here, but I hopefully can elucidate what was said in both the questionnaire and you've seen my resume. I moved to Westchester in 1986, fresh out of the Navy JAG Corps. I was an attorney. I took up a position with Dick Morton. Maybe some of you know Dick. He passed away about 2-3 years ago. Worked for him for a while, and then worked at Gothrop Greenwood, where I did some municipal work, zoning hearing board work, etc. Then I went into the wonderful world of environmental claims and insurance. And while I'm still a Pennsylvania lawyer, I haven't practiced since 1990. During that time, I've been active in many things, including being a sports official. I've been involved with my children in sports. I've been involved with my children up until, hopefully, in May or June, my son will graduate from Henderson. And I think it's time to give back. I think you can see from my resume that I'm someone who has both an analytical ability to see details, but as a result of what I've done throughout my life, I've always had an ability to see things at a 10,000-foot level. I played team sports for a long time, and I know you both need people that are willing to act as a team, and you need leadership. I believe my questionnaire really hit the points that I wanted to hit about the need for transparency, about the need to work together, about the need to do it in a transparent and civilized manner. And I think that if you select me, I'll work hard, and it will be a credit to the good work that you've done, credit to our students, a credit to the taxpayers, and we'll be able to decide whether I want to run for a 4-year term at some point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Sundquist. And Mr. Christie it is?
That is correct.
All right, go ahead. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I am happy to be here, and thank you for allowing me to be one of the 3 up here to speak.
I grew up in Westchester. I went to Hillsdale, went to Stetson, went to Henderson, so I'm a product of this district. I live in the borough right across the street from Hillsdale, so I haven't been able to escape it quite yet. But I love this school district, and I love public education. In my professional career, there's been every step along the way has had a touch point of public ed. I originally went to Westchester to be a teacher, did my student teaching at Pierce. Subbed in the district, was a long-term sub at Ruston. And from there, further down the line, started working for Special Olympics, and we partnered with the School District of Philadelphia. I ran a program called Unified. A lot of the high schools in the district have this program. I know Jamie Wagner at Henderson leads it, and she's come here and has spoken about it several times. It's something I'm incredibly proud of, because I do believe that all students deserve the chance and opportunity to learn, and whether that's through sports or math class or English class, that we need to be, as a board, uplifting all of those students. Yeah, so from my time from Special Olympics, I started working in the Pennsylvania State Senate, and my boss, he is a state senator out in Delaware County, and he is on the Senate Education Committee, and through that, we talk a lot about policies and, from funding to mandates and, PlanCon and all those grant programs. I feel like I have a really good sense of this education stuff that's happening at the Harrisburg level, and can always talk to my boss about that. His name's Senator Carney, and yeah, and run ideas by him and get the insight from someone that's doing it all the time and talking about those issues, especially in Delaware County. And yeah, that's why I'm here. I love these schools, and I love public education, and I think ultimately, I would love to work with you all and be one of the 9-10 voices that are guiding the ship, and making sure that our students, our teachers, the families, and the community at large is being included in that process. We talked a lot about transparency tonight, and that is, yeah, I am 100% behind that, and I'm 100% behind closing those gaps, those achievement gaps, and making sure our teachers, from a few weeks ago, the surveys where morale of teachers may be down a little bit, and supporting those teachers, which are really the lifeblood of the schools and what make them so great. So yeah, that's why I'm here, and that's what I would look forward to doing alongside all of you. So thanks.
Thank you. Now, you have considered, you have heard, and now I'm looking for a nomination for the person who will fill this role. So it's open. I don't nominate. One of you.
James Wilson.
Sorry, did I call on you? Wait, is Stacy?
I nominate James Wilson.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll vote. Oh, I need a second. Gary, so we have a second. Discussion.
Are we doing discussion? I thought we go right to the nomination. And then
If you have something you'd like to say, by all means.
I'm ready for vote.
Call for the vote.
Director Walmsley,
Yes.
Director Bevilacqua,
No.
Director Herman,
No.
Director Chester,
No.
Director Fleming,
No.
Director Dietrich,
No.
Director Durnell,
No.
President Tiernan.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, going to round two. I need another nomination. Mrs. Herman, Dr. Herman,
I nominate Alex Christie.
second. Dr. Dietrich. Call for the vote.
Director Herman,
Yes.
Director Dietrich,
Yes.
Director Chester,
Yes.
Director Fleming,
Yes.
Director Walmsley,
No.
Director Durnell,
Yes.
Vice President Bevilacqua,
Yes.
President Tiernan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so Mr. Christie, having achieved the 7 votes out of 8, is going to be appointed to this seat for the next 8 months. So if we could, gentlemen, thank you very much. Run, run, come back and run. Thank you both.
So, you place your left hand on the Bible, so left hand and then you raise your right. So repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Alex Christie,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Quick, Alex, get a blue chair.
There you go.
They are not as comfortable as they may look. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with that, the special meeting of the Westchester Area School District for this evening is finished. Now, it is not finished. We have public comment. We welcome you to the microphone. Welcome, Alex.
We have one non-agenda registrant for public comment.
I'll waive it.
You're going to waive it? Okay, thank you. Then we have no non-agenda.
So you were right.
The meeting is now ended, and,
May we have a first and a second, though, for the adjournment?
in order to adjourn, that would be Mrs. Chester, and a second from Dr. Dietrich. Thank you so much. And now we will adjourn. Thank you. Thank you for coming.